For our final project this semester, we're going to be combining our Altered Objects project with our All Found, All Created project. These two projects are going to mesh together to form a longer project that you guys are going to be able to use extensive materials and all of the skills that you've learned thus far in this semester. For the Altered Objects part of the project, if you read through your grading rubric, we notice that the Victorian paper theater was a traditional structure that artists used to alter pre-existing books. And when we alter these books, or we change how they function, the work is often known as book works, while those that reference the shape of the book are known as book objects. Okay? Other types of work produced by artists in book format include concrete poetry, where meaning is derived from spatial, pictorial, and typographic characteristics of the work. So that means that you're using the imagery, you're using the language that's inside the book in its position that it was printed in. So I could find an image in here, and I would make sure, if I was viewing from the front, I would make sure that I could use this image by cutting through the first section of pages of this book and allowing this image to show through. Or I might find a phrase that I'm really interested in, and I would do the same thing. Cut through the surface of that book to show each and every one of those important phrases that I've found. Okay? The purpose of our All Found, All Created project was to focus on found objects versus created forms, and start to dabble with this idea of assemblage. Assemblage is an artistic form or medium, usually created on a defined substrate, so that means a ground, as we've been working in the past this semester, that consists of three-dimensional elements projecting out or from that substrate. It's similar to a collage, but you're going to be using found objects, and it's not limited to found objects at all. So you can use made objects, so any of the past experimentations that you've done for this past texture project, or even any of the projects or the collages that you have with you that you made earlier in the semester. And the origin of the assemblage here comes from the Cubist constructions of Pablo Picasso, okay? And it can be traced back to the early 1950s when Jean Dubuffet created a series of collages of butterfly wings, which he titled Assemblage d'Empreintes. So, however Marcel Duchamp and Pablo Picasso worked with these objects, okay, others had been working with found objects for many years prior to this, okay? And it's in the 1950s and 60s that assemblage started to become widely known and used. And artists like Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns started using scrappy materials, so all these found objects that you can find in your junk drawer, around the house, on a walk maybe, or packaging material that comes in the mail, as anti-aesthetic art sculptures, okay? A big part of the idea that make assemblage is what it is that these scrappy materials and objects are used to make something that we would traditionally think of as artwork. So I've got a couple examples to show you here, just a setup of all these different found objects that took me about maybe 10 or 15 minutes to go around the house and collect. So I've got the top of an apothecary jar that broke, that I saved because I liked how it distorted the images below. So you might decide to attach this to your substrate and have it protrude off the wall. I've got a root system from a tree that I picked up on a walk, some PVC pipe, old cabinetry hinges from the kitchen, a furniture claw foot with a glass knob in it. It's pretty interesting. Some sort of mounting mechanism for a fishing rod onto the gunnel of my canoe that I never use because I have another one. Cabinetry knobs, any sort of jewelry or old chain that you have around. And again, another cabinetry knob, old metal, and this kind of metallic keyhole decorative element used for architectural structures. I've also got some of my created materials, so some of the acrylic skins that I made that I showed you in some of the last demonstrations, okay? Wood glue and joint compound, acrylic paint, house paint, some nails, upholstery tacks, a botched casting that didn't come out because I didn't put enough mold release on this, enough petroleum jelly on this, but I can still use that for part of my assemblage. Again, these corners that came in the mail on something that shipped that are plastic, some of my lace paper, and my collage woven element from last week's demonstration. Okay, so I've just got some examples of some books that you can use. You can use your sketchbook that you're working in right now. Okay, more than viable option for altering. This blue book I mentioned briefly earlier, an older book that has a lot of interesting images and text in it. So you could cut back into that and create some sort of visual alignment to create poetry with the text. Any sort of pamphlet, even if it's small, you can put them together and create a multiple leaf booklet. This I got from Savers a while ago for book board, but these are great books to cut back into with the padded cover. It could be quite interesting. Any sort of bare bones sketchbook that you have laying around. Could be an old sketchbook that's already used. An old book, again from Savers. This happens to be a Ted's catalog with nice paper and beautiful fabric covers. Okay, so those are some different types of objects or altered books that you can create. I also have some examples of boxes here. So this is an old bottle box, okay, that I've altered, and we'll be doing the stop motion film of that later in this demonstration video, so you'll get to see that. This is a tea box with the packaging that the tea bags came in that have been altered with image transfer and Never Dull, which is this material here. It's a magic wadding polish. It's used for polishing brass and copper, or automotive trim, also used for silverware. So if you have something like this at home under the sink, that can work. So painted in, rubbed away, using decollage, image transfer, as well as my collaging techniques with these pieces of wallpaper, old pieces of wallpaper that I have laying around in my collage materials archive. Okay, so that's an option. Just an example of a simple object that most of you probably have around is a shoebox. This one's pretty unique in that it has magnets. So you can add magnets to a box, and pretty unique in the way that it opens. Okay, so just make sure, and you'll see me do this in the demonstration videos, if you're using an object that has a glossy surface like this one, you can see it's pretty shiny. The thing that we want to make sure that we do is we just take some sandpaper and rough that surface up so that the glue or the wax or whatever adhesive you're using adheres to that surface instead of just peeling right back off. And so the stop motion here and the quick speed is going to reference probably about 6 to 7 hours of work for each piece, okay? And you might have to make multiple iterations of these to get the result that you want. So make sure that if you are wanting to use a book like this for your final, okay, that you might end up doing a test in a sketchbook or a test in an old children's book before you go into your final object, just to make sure that things are going to work the way you want them to. Okay, especially because a lot of us have limited materials right now. So that was about an hour and a half to prepare my ground from the front. You saw me excavate here and make some measurements as I carved back down into space. I altered some of the windows here so I could then later place images inside so I could see images next to the negative spaces. I created a flap here using the pre-existing binding that this book already has, okay? So I prepared my ground from the front. I cut into it, and then you saw me sand it because it's got this glossy surface. If you don't have sandpaper at home, another good thing to use would be a pumice stone or any kind of emery board. If you're looking for something beyond those materials, you can also use table salt on a rag or a paper towel and just scrape off as best you can that glossy surface so that the glue will have something to adhere to. So again, I just prepared my ground from the front. If I wanted this book to be closed and only be able to be viewed from the front here with this flap being functional, then I would be all set and ready to go, ready to start adding some of my collage elements. If I wanted this book to be able to be flipped through and read, I could also start to carve back into some of these larger positive spaces here so that only as the viewer or the reader flips through the book can they then see the additional negative spaces or excavations. So as you can see, as I flip, my excavations get shallower and shallower as I go, and I have more positive space to work with. If you don't want to see those additional excavations from the front, just make sure that they don't show through that original window that you cut.